Welcome to New England Lacrosse Journal's Chasing the Goal podcast, your destination for all things lacrosse. I'm your host, Kyle Devitt. Back in the studio, baby. Jack Piatelli, how we doing?
Great. He's back, all right. Look at him.
Yeah, I'm smiling.
Your hair is a mess, though, I'll tell you. It's a mess.
Yes.
You haven't gotten a cut in a while, huh?
No, we're not. I didn't get a cut since I got hurt.
And it's potted right down the middle.
Yeah.
And you're not wearing a hat. You're trying to show off your hair today?
I'm just going dreamy 90s, teen heartthrob. That's what I'm going for.
So now do you qualify to go to a beauty parlor now? Are you going to go to a beauty parlor to get it all decked out and everything?
I just haven't cut it. I'm just not going to cut it.
Just going to let it go?
I said I was just going to get a flow for when I go and show up to the first practice for the kids and just be like, what's up, guys? And just do like a little head shake, and they'll be like.
Actually, a producer note, Kyle, 1992 just called. They want that hair back.
Yeah?
Right now. Yeah.
Well, you can't have it. I'm going straight Patrick Swayze on everyone's face.
So how you feeling? How's the knee? You all right?
I'm walking. I'm going upstairs. Downstairs is a little sketchy, obviously, but we're progressing. I've turned a corner now. I had a real bad time the first 2 months, which I can't wait to talk to our guest about today, Mike Perry.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. This is we've been chatting for about 15, 20 minutes, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Why don't you tell everyone about kind of your background and your training?
I've been a strength coach for 20 years, and when I went to school, actually my goal was to be a cop. And at that point, there was no jobs whatsoever, and I was an athlete. I played collegiate soccer at MCLA, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had a bunch of friends that were training and playing with the Revolution, and I was able to link up with them, went to a training facility, and they brought me in. I trained with them, met the owner, and he said, hey, you ever think about being a coach? And I'm like, well, yes and no. I didn't go to school for this. I went to school to be a cop. And he goes, why don't you do an internship and go from there? So I started. I was driving from Attleboro, Massachusetts to Wellesley, and I did that for 7 years. And throughout that time, I was very, very fortunate. I had some amazing mentors along the way. A guy named BJ Baker we were talking about. He was the strength and conditioning coach for the Sox, for the Red Sox back in the day, worked with Nomar, Canseco, and then another one of my mentors, Tim Brewster, the guy that started Train Boston Sports Center. He had passed away a few years ago, but he was the strength coach for the Revolution. So I got to learn from all of these incredible coaches. And then right away, I was working with MLS guys. I was working with guys in the NFL from the Patriots, Major League Baseball. And I basically landed this dream scenario where I was working with pro athletes within like 3 years. Now, I had no business working with pro athletes at that time because I wasn't ready. But I didn't screw them up, and that's kind of like the first rule when you train pro athletes is like, don't hurt them. But anyways, throughout that time, I just kept on learning and just kept on sort of going through education, and I was fortunate enough to work for a company called Functional Movement Systems, and FMS is a company that was born from the works of Gray Cook and Lee Burton, two physical therapists, and they started this screening system where you can evaluate athletes from a movement standpoint, and that was the gold standard. It's used in the NFL, NBA, you name it. So that's something that they use at the Combine, and I've been fortunate to teach for them. So I've been a lead instructor with them for the last 8 years, where I get to travel all over the U.S. and educate and teach coaches. In addition to that, I work for another company as a lecturer, and there's a guy named Pavel Satsulin. He's the crazy Russian kettlebell guy, right? So this guy popularized kettlebell training, and I got into that very, very early. And I'm fortunate enough to teach and lecture for him as well. So I get to go all over the U.S., teach, lecture, and do that. So I got affiliated with those two companies pretty early, and then I decided, hey, it's time to start my own. So my wife is from Westford, and we decided, hey, we want to start a family. We're going to start a gym out in Chelmsford called Skill of Strength, and we've been there for 13 years, and it's been a crazy ride. It's been a large amount of learning throughout that process, starting a business from scratch, and so now, 20 years in, I'm at the point where I can, do a little bit more fun stuff, get to hang out with guys like you. And now my main focus is lacrosse. I am absolutely bought in with lacrosse. And even my buddies are like, are you good, man? You're like, you're getting a little into this. I'm like, I'm perfectly good. Like I'm fired up. So long story short, this is 20 years in the making. And now I'm really excited to do whatever I can to help the lacrosse community through my goals and through my skills rather.
Is there a difference in training professional athletes versus like a collegiate in high school?
100%. So professional athletes are there for a reason. They are the top 1 to 2%. They are the outliers. So you don't need to make, generally speaking, large changes with really good athletes. Like, what are you going to go to like Usain Bolt or LeBron James and go, I can make you better? You're probably not going to make them better, right? So a big part of training professional athletes is keeping them healthy for as long as possible, because that will allow them to make as much money as possible, and that's what it's all about. So professional athletes, the real key is keeping them healthy and keeping them on the field and not in the training room. Now, when you're looking at younger athletes, high school, collegiate, they usually have a little bit more physical needs. Maybe guys need to lift a little bit more, spend a little bit more time in the weight room. Maybe they need to just develop, because some kids grow a lot later. So it really depends on the individual. But I would say from a high school standpoint, just learning how to lift, doing the basic strength training stuff very, very well consistently over time is going to be your best friend. Same thing with college and then eventually with pros. But I think the hard part is strength and conditioning is very underrepresented in the lacrosse world. It's usually a guy or a dad, nothing wrong with that if you're volunteering your time, of course, or it's the football coach in college that's like, hey, I can train lacrosse players. So what do? The lacrosse team gets the same program as the football team, and they're not the same sport. And that's the issue that I sort of have with how strength and conditioning has traditionally been done, because lacrosse players deserve better. You know, like I've seen what happens out there in the world of strength and conditioning for lacrosse, and I'm not impressed whatsoever.
Wow. And so the formula to train a lacrosse player versus a soccer, football, hockey is different.
Same but different, yeah. So I would say that, so for example, from a cardiovascular standpoint, right, the running, you know, middies and lacrosse have a lot more running. So they're going to have to train a little bit more different styles of conditioning, and we can definitely get into that. But they're going to need a lot of that sort of burst where they're going to have to, you know, get in a corner and get in a hard battle for 5-8 seconds and then sprint 40 yards and repeat. So those guys have different needs than attackmen, who are generally going to cover a little bit less ground, and same thing with defensemen. So,
and a lot more stops and starts with
100%.
attackmen and things like that, training, you know,
so
working on the groins, the hamstrings, the whole 9 yards.
100%. So look, mobile is mobile, strong is strong, fast is fast. And hopefully the goal of a strength and conditioning coach is to keep those athletes healthy, develop those skills so they can showcase their lacrosse skills on the field. So strength and conditioning should be a supplementation to making a better lacrosse player. That's what it should do. And if it's not, then why are you doing it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that young players, especially, when you first start telling freshmen, sophomores, 8th graders, hey, you probably need to get in the weight room eventually if you want to play. Like, I've had that conversation every season I've coached younger kids. I'm just like, if you really want to play, like, it's great that you're fast. It's great that you love the game. It's great that you're on the wall. I love that. You're getting knocked down every time you go for a ground ball. And I think that kind of realization and putting that back into the game, because I think, you know, lacrosse for a lot of people isn't their only sport. And if that's true, that, you know, you don't see a ton of basketball players doing a ton of lifting, right? So I think that if you're getting kids from that, soccer players don't do a ton of lifting compared to football, especially. I think that's kind of the gold standards of lifting sports, if we're going into that, right? Mm-hmm. That conversation is something that I think comes as a shock to a lot of younger kids. Do you find that in your kind of setup or no?
Yes, because I think people assume that at a certain point, in order to get better at lacrosse, they need to do more lacrosse. And for some kids, that is 100% the answer. Mm-hmm. For some kids, they get enough lacrosse. Maybe they need more sleep, or maybe they need to learn how to lift weights, right? So I think it really depends on the coach and the parents, and being able to look at a kid and go, like, what are you good at? What buckets are filled and what buckets are not filled? And a really good coach will be like, look, like, your lateral movement's terrible, but your top speed is great. So look, if your top speed is great, let's preserve the top speed, but let's get you better at lateral movement. So it's all about filling buckets. And every time I work with an athlete or a team, I look at where are my opportunities to make the greatest impact and what bucket is potentially not getting filled. And sometimes it's not even something that I do. Sometimes it's they're eating McDonald's every time before a game and they feel like absolute crap. So maybe it's not a strength training issue. Maybe it's not a lacrosse issue. Maybe it's a McDonald's issue or a Wendy's issue. And every single time you're running around on the field, you feel like you're going to be sick. So I think what we have to do is look at the entire kid and start to look at where is our opportunity to make the biggest impact. And I think that's how we have to look at making a change in strength and conditioning. But it's not just about the strength and conditioning. It's about the entire sort of system that the athletes are surrounding themselves with.
What is the one exercise that we'll make everyone better. Because I feel like everyone's going to, if you say squats, I understand. But if it's not squats, I want to know what it is.
I would say a single leg squat or a single leg deadlift variation. I think a lot of athletes spend too much time doing bilateral exercises like a squat or a deadlift, and there's nothing wrong with those. They're very, very good exercises. But if you look at the sport, any sport, running is a one-legged sport. When you're running, 1 foot hits the ground at a time.
I know I can't run right now.
You can hop though. You can hop on 1 foot.
I can.
But what my point is that when we run, it's this reciprocal movement. So it's left, right, left, right, left, right. So if you aren't competent and stable on one leg, I don't care how much you can deadlift or squat because it doesn't make a difference for me.
You're pro deadlift.
I love deadlifts.
Really?
Yeah.
You're the first trainer I've met in like 10 years that is okay with deadlifts.
Why? Why wouldn't we be?
Well, all the evidence suggests that it's a strength exercise that doesn't actually improve everything else, right?
We can get into the sort of the research world. Here's the way that I look at it. So deadlifting, having the ability to lift a heavy object off the ground safely is a good skill to have in life, but also the ability to sit and load with your hips is an expression of athletic-based movement. If you look at a broad jump or a vertical jump, when they go and they load to jump, like in the combine, they go right into a hip hinge, and that is the bottom of the deadlift position.
Right.
That is the identical position. So the question is should we be deadlifting heavy?
I think that's probably what I was going for.
Okay,
Yes.
so context is everything.
Fair.
So for me to say like deadlifts are good or bad, that's like me saying you should eat food.
Right.
It's just food.
Yeah.
Specificity is king. So
McDonald's or
100%. But
Italian
perfect
pasta.
example. I have some athletes I don't deadlift because it doesn't feel good and they don't like it. So guess what? I don't use it. I don't get paid by what exercise I choose and put in their
You
program.
don't get paid by max rep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I actually think to for that point, I think 1 RM testing for like field and court athletes is the dumbest thing on the planet.
Yeah. I quick story. After college, I got into lifting really heavy because I was coaching in college, and I was coaching all these athletes, and I was like, oh, I can lift like you. I'm gonna I went hero ball in the weight room, and my goal one off season was I'm gonna bench 300 pounds. I'm 5'7". At the time, I was probably 180. I ate so much garbage to get the calories, and I finally did it after about 3 months of training. My max before that was about 260. I get up, I lifted 305 in a Planet Fitness of all places.
Best place. Did you set off the lunk alarm?
No, I did it. Not that time. I have before. Trust me. I did it, and I remember feeling so empty and terrible that like it was my goal. I was like, this is my goal. This is my goal. I want this. I'm gonna do this. Everyone said I couldn't do it. I'm gonna do it. I did it, and I went, oh, I'm fat now. This is the worst.
Yeah.
I feel terrible. But I did it, right? And I think that's kind of like one of those things where the competitiveness of the weight room, you think it's the same as the field. It's not. Because in the weight room, it's just you. And if you can beat that, there were so many sacrifices that I had to make personally that I shouldn't have made. And it actually made me very unhealthy. And I was very upset afterwards because I was like, I wanted this thing so bad. And I was like, oh, gross. Just felt gross.
So I think a couple of the issues that we have in the world of strength and conditioning is ego lifting, like you said, but I think a big part of it is ego of the strength coaches. My athletes can do this. Right. My athletes can do this. Saying that your athlete can deadlift 600 pounds is way cooler than saying my athlete played a decent career for 10 years. Like, you see what I'm saying? So, I think it's a big ego thing, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because if you can show me concrete data that, triple body weight deadlifting or, doing a power clean that's double body weight is going to make a lacrosse player exponentially better, I'm all in. But until that happens, it will never happen, because no one's going to fund that study. But until that happens, it's about decision making and making sure that you're not doing dumb things. Because I think the most important component when it comes to exercise selection is don't do dumb things. Like, if you're looking at it and going, should I do that? The answer is no.
Yeah.
Like, why? What's the point? If you hurt your shoulder on that last rep, then your 1 10-second decision is going to impact the next 6 months of your life because you're being a moron. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I'm a high school athlete, and I'm looking to, get faster, maybe a little bit stronger. I come to you. Do we sit down? Do we have an evaluation? Every athlete that comes to you is different, obviously. So how do you know what to start with, what you're going to plan to work with them to make them faster, stronger, bigger, whatever they desire? Or do you evaluate them and tell them you need to get faster, you need to get stronger? These are the things you need to work on to be performing at a high level on the field.
Well, so, I think a lot of the times people come in and they always say stuff like that. I need to get faster. I need to do this. And I always say, compared to what?
Right.
And it's usually like a guy that comes in with his 10-year-old son. He's like, my kid needs to get faster, but he's comparing his kid to the 12-year-old kid that's like already got a beard.
Right.
And he's like, my kid needs to get faster, but it's like that's really not the situation that you're looking for. But in general, yes, when we come in, we have a brand new client, we sit down, and the first thing we do is have a conversation with them. That's it. We don't talk about really training yet, but we just want to know where they're at, what their goals are. We want to get to know them because look, yes, they're a potential customer for us, but if we don't have a good rapport and we don't click, I don't want to spend the next 4 months training someone that I don't like. So the initial consultation is almost like a fact-finding mission to make sure that it's a good match and that it's a good fit. But generally speaking, we look at their schedule, we look at their weekly schedule, we look at sort of everything that they do outside of the gym, because every decision that you make from an athletic standpoint is going to impact how you function and the adaptations that you're looking to get. So we look at everything, and then we start with the basic movement evaluation. We look at, how well they move, how, their hips, their ankles, all that stuff. We kind of break them down in a somewhat orthopedic sense. We're not clinicians, but we want to see what they're capable of from a movement standpoint. And then, depending on the athlete, we will get into performance testing, where we'll look at their 10-yard acceleration, we'll look at their 15-yard acceleration, their vertical leap, stuff like that. But again, I use performance testing for younger kids as just metrics and data to look at improvements. I'm not looking at it to break world records. I'm just looking at, hey, look, you were running a 1.6 on your 10. Now you're running a 1.5. That's fantastic. So we start off and we try to get as much metrics and data as possible, and we track everything, because if you can't track it,
right,
how do you know if you're making appreciable change?
Now, do you have a different philosophy for men and women? The way they're trained, or very similar?
So I actually think the big thing is, I think women need to spend more time strength training in general. I think there's a lot of females that feel like they're going to get big and bulky if they lift, and that is the only way a female is going to get big and bulky if she lifts is if she's literally doing anabolics and eating nonstop.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get a 13, 14-year-old girl looking like a dude from lifting weights for 6 months. It's just not going to happen. So I think the most beneficial thing you can do for females is strength training. 100%. Strength training. I think for males, I think a lot of the guys, they do need the strength training, but a lot of the times they skip their warm-ups and their mobility work, and they just want to bench and they just want to do arms, right? So I think the big key here is, again, we look at what buckets are filled, right? My goal is to fill buckets, not have you do more arms. And there's nothing wrong with doing arms. If you want to do your arms at the end of a session, have fun with it. But my point is that if you're hiring me, my goal is to make you better. And I'm not sure supersetting biceps and triceps is going to make the most appreciable change in your career from a sports standpoint.
Yeah. So people that have been listening to the podcast know that I tore my ACL this summer, and I've been in rehab. And for PT, I go to PT basically every day. I get to work out at the PT facility, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that they all think is funny is that I groan and grunt through everything. And I'm just like, well, I don't know how to do it any other way. Like they're training mostly elderly patients or like high school kids that like aren't pushing that yet. Mm-hmm. So I make a face, I grunt, but I do it, right? And they all think I'm kind of mad at them when I do it, right? Like it's like a personal, not attack, but like I'll unintentionally. The face doesn't lie. I can't lie with this face. Everything comes out, right? Like I'm not holding back anything. You know that. You've been in the studio with me for over 2 years now.
Yeah.
If I don't like something, you pretty much know, right? and I'll make a face or whatever. I'm asking you because I'm asking basically to confirm my trainer's emotions. Is that all right? Because I think I feel like I'm hurting her feelings all the time.
Well, honestly, you can't control if someone gets offended or not. But I think that just do your thing.
Yeah.
Who cares? If you're getting
gotta get through it.
I mean, if you're screaming,
it's like anything.
It's getting weird.
It's like anything. Like when someone passes away and people respond like, "Oh, they didn't react the way they should have when that person died. Everybody reacts differently.
Yeah.
So in that situation, I don't know how I'm going to react.
Right.
You know,
Until it
I
happens.
might be yelling and screaming and biting my tongue and going crazy. You just don't know. I've never been in that situation. So that's the way you get better and recover.
Yeah, and that's one of the real reasons I want to have you on here. So, because I
Has nothing to do
I've
with-
never
with
been.
anything
No,
else.
it's great. What you do. I mean, several people. We have several people in common, both Jack and I, that already train with you or know you. One of the things that I've never been hurt this bad, right? I've been hurt multiple times, probably like 50 times. Never had to get surgery, but I've always did PT and come back from so much stuff. This is the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to me physically, right? And it carried over into my mental state very heavily. Do you encounter that in what you do with your training? Do you train guys after injuries? Do you have to account for that? What's your process for that? Because I'm super interested in that.
Yeah, it's funny. I've probably done about 50 to 70 return to play ACLs in my lifetime, and there is let's just say there's sort of three components of the ACL rehab, right? There's the hardware issue, which is the joints, and the tendons and the connective, but there's a software issue, right? Because your brain sort of runs the motor pattern, but then there's the psychological part, right?
Yep.
The psyche, and I find that the last thing to come back is the psyche, is does the athlete feel confident enough that they can play their sport and not think about their knee?
Yeah.
That is when you know an athlete is ready, because they'll tell you, right? A lot of kids, am I ready? Am I ready? Am I ready? And I want to get to the point where like they feel like they're ready and they'll make that decision, because when they make that decision, there's a mental switch that happens. They're going, I'm good, like I'm healthy, I'm not broken anymore. And I think a big part of ACL rehab, especially when you're dealing with young females, that's just young females are the ones that
More
tend
susceptible.
more susceptible. Absolutely. And I think the most important thing is just encouragement and just consistency and letting them know that we have a plan for them and we're going to get them there. I think that is quite often more important than the physical part. Yes, the exercise and the way that we do things are important, but look, like you said, it's a big injury, right? So it happened to you a little bit older in life, but think about that 13, 14-year-old girl that just blew her knee out and had dreams of, whatever. I'm not saying that the dreams are over, but my point is it's huge. It's big, because a lot of people identify themselves by their ability to do physical things. Yeah. And like, you played sports your entire life and you couldn't. That was taken away, and that sucks. Yeah. So for a lot of people, well, they'll probably say, it's just your knee. But it's like, well, no, it's not just your knee. It's like, this is what I do. Like, it's almost like an identity thing. It's really, really weird, but I've noticed it's huge. The psychological aspect is absolutely huge when it comes to that. Any big injury.
Right.
The second annual New England Youth Lacrosse Convention returns to Gillette Stadium on Sunday, February 4th. This year's event is presented by the Boston Cannons and powered by Mass Youth Lacrosse. Over 40 presenters and 30 vendors covering all topics for the girls and boys youth game for town leaders, coaches, and parents. Visit mathyouthLax.org to purchase tickets. That site again, mathyouthLax.org. Once again this winter, Piatelli Lacrosse has a great way for you to stay in shape and play lacrosse this offseason. Starting in January, their indoor lacrosse program will take place at Four Kicks in Taunton. This program is open to youth and high school players of all ages, regardless of school or club affiliation. The up-tempo pace of indoor box lacrosse is an excellent way for players to learn to play faster and develop new skills that will make you more effective on the field come spring. Coaches will be provided for each game, and all players will take part in a mini clinic prior to their game to work on different box lacrosse skills. Make the most of your off-season and play some box lacrosse. For more information on Piatelli's Winter Box Lacrosse League, visit piatellilacrosse.com. That's Piatelli lacrosse.com.
Now, you've trained so many different athletes, soccer, football, hockey. What made you make the decision all lacrosse now?
Well, we were talking about this earlier. So I've trained professional athletes my entire life. I've been very, very fortunate. In the last 10 years, 12 years, I've been working with guys in the UFC. And I was, I'd be going to the fights. I'd be going to, casinos. I'd be spending late nights in the city. And that worked for a while. And I was starting to get bored of it. And then 3 years ago, when I was 40, wasn't feeling so hot, and I went to the doctors and ended up, long story short, getting diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer when I was 40 years old. And at that time, it was pretty scary because I didn't know it was going to happen. Right away they I had a colonoscopy. They were like, "This is not good. Like, we need to get you, surgery, chemo." So during that time, I had my my surgery first, and then I waited a month, and then I did 6 months of chemotherapy, and that was lacrosse season for my son. Mm-hmm. And he was having a tough time. Obviously, your dad has cancer. That's kind of tough, and he was having a tough time, but he just kept on playing lacrosse, and that was like the one point where he didn't think about his dad being sick. So for me, I was like, he loves this game. I gotta get more involved somehow. And then throughout the few years, I'm very fortunate. I'm cancer free now, but I just decided, look, I want to spend time with my kids and do something that I enjoy. And, I had a big wake up call, and I was having a lot of fun training pro athletes, but now it's like, I want to spend time with my family. I want to help a bunch of kids. And that's why I've fallen in love with lacrosse. It's something that when I was sick, my kid loved it, and that made him happy. And for me, that's all I need. So I'm all in on the sport, and if I can help someone, that's what I want to do.
Good for you. That's great. Was that your first colonoscopy?
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, my first one, and I had some stomach stuff, and they woke me up, and this was during COVID. So you're not supposed to have anybody in the hospital during COVID.
Right.
And I woke up, and my wife was there, and I was like, in and out. I was like, this isn't good. And then they told me, and that was it. So it was.
What prompted you to get a colonoscopy? Because the message out there obviously is for the men out there. I've had a couple of them. You got to go out and get one.
I was having some stomach issues, but I'm going to be honest. I was ignoring them. Right. I was just ignoring them and being an idiot, and it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to me. And then I called my doctor, and I was telling him I was having some other issues. He's like, "Hey, let's go check this out." And sure enough, boom. I was like, sure. It was pretty brutal. So I mean, honestly, like, I think the most important thing is they actually changed the age from 50 to 45. From a colonoscopy screening. But I think the most important thing is, like, if you have any changes in your body, you notice something's off, go see a doctor, right? Do what you got to do. Also check into your family history. Yeah. My family didn't really talk much. Come to find out, I had 4 of my relatives that had it. No one ever knew.
Wow.
So if I knew that,
yeah,
like, maybe I could have gotten screened 10 years ago. So like for me now with my 2 sons, yeah, I'm going to make sure that, and even my doctor, so like those guys need to get screened like in their late 20s, because you never know, because unfortunately it's a nasty disease, and it's impacting more and more young people. So, I mean, you got to get those routine tests. Don't skip it. That's just moronic.
Yeah. I think also one of the things that, you're telling this story, and you couldn't be in a better place with 2 people that are dedicated their lives to lacrosse. And, for me to like know that there's someone on the training side that actually cares about lacrosse in that way, that isn't working for a school or a pro team or something like that. Like, you chose, and you could have done all these other avenues, and you chose lacrosse. Mm-hmm. It's almost like lacrosse chooses you. So like, I feel like you're in a pretty exclusive club of people, not just Jack and I, but like so many people that are in lacrosse that are lifelong lacrosse people. You don't choose it. It chooses you. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think it really fell into my lap, and it's going to sound very, very silly, but just from the people that I've met and the process in which things happened, from the guys that I trained to the coaches that I've met, it's like, wow, I'm running into all these people, and some of them are just old friends that I haven't seen in years, and then just reconnecting. But yeah, I just like I said, is with everything that's happened, and now my business is, we've been around for 13 years, and we've got a pretty solid business, so now my afternoons are wide open. So whether I'm just going in the backyard and thinking of drills, or training my son, or taking some guys out to the field, so my goal is I want my afternoons and evenings to be lacrosse until it can't be lacrosse anymore. And that's what I want to do. So I volunteer in town. I just, it's just a lot of fun for me. And that's, at the end of the day, it's what I want to do. I want to help a lot of people, and I love the sport. I'm new to the sport, but I'm not new to coaching. It's
really amazing. Like, when I was in high school, graduated in 82, college 86, training wasn't in the programs. It was, you went to practice. Some guys lifted weights. I never lifted weights. I did push-ups, sit-ups. I had a guy come up to me when I was early in my playing career and said, the key to a good lacrosse player is you got to have strong wrists and forearms, right? And so he said, I said, well, how do I build my wrists and forearms? He said, put sand in your shaft and play wall ball.
God.
Yeah. So I used to play wall ball with sand in my shaft.
Nice.
And so where I gained a lot of strength was picking up ground balls, and playing hockey helped too. But when you train these lacrosse players, do you keep those skill sets in mind, like parts of the body that need to be stronger than others to be successful on the field?
Everything that I do has intent and has a system to it. From the second we warm up to the second we finish the session, everything has a place. So, for example, grip strength. I program a lot of grip work. One of my favorite exercises for lacrosse players and in general is, you guys are familiar with kettlebells, right?
Sure.
And so if you just hold a kettlebell upside down, bottoms up, you just hold it and walk. It's called the bottoms up carry. You just walk. That's all you get to do is walk. Don't drop it. Walk for 20 seconds on one side, 20 seconds on the other side, 4 or 5 sets, you're good to go. We've seen guys do that with a 80-pound kettlebell. You want to talk about wrist and grip strength? Balancing that kettlebell bottoms up, and if it falls, you just let it go. So my point is that's a simple exercise, boom, right away, that you can make an immediate impact on your wrist and grip strength for lacrosse. Right away, that's one of the best things.
Can I tell you? So the sand story, we did that in high school, but we had a kid.
It didn't do much for you.
No, it did great. It did great things. No, this story is hilarious. So we had
Even
a kid,
the producer's laughing.
We had a kid who couldn't find sand.
Oh my God.
So I'm dead serious.
In New Hampshire?
In New Hampshire, he couldn't find sand. Guess what he put in his shaft instead?
Rocks.
No.
Infill from the turf.
M&Ms.
What's the worst thing that interacts
chocolate.
with water that you could put in a shaft?
Salt?
Kitty litter.
Oh my God.
He put kitty litter in his shaft, and we didn't know because we can't see it.
Yeah.
So we're playing
Oh my God.
a game in the rain, and his stick basically explodes.
And there's kitty litter everywhere.
And it's like, we're like, what is this? What's all over what's happening? He's like, oh yeah, I couldn't find sand, so I put kitty litter in my shot. It was a long pole. So it's like double the amount.
It was
everywhere.
a couple of bags of kitty litter.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was
Oh God, that's
hilarious.
Funny. That is hilarious.
Big Doug. Long stick Doug, we call him.
So I just wonder how he had access to more kitty litter than sand. I mean, he must have a pet.
Listen, I grew up in a really small town.
Okay, fair enough.
I just got to tell you.
Okay.
So, just want to put that.
We talked a little bit before we went on air here, and you had mentioned that you do train different positions differently in lacrosse. Men and women, midfield, attack, goalies, D.
Yeah, so I'll be brutally honest. I haven't had the opportunity to work with a lot of female lacrosse players yet, and that's something that within our town I want to start helping out with, more so on the strength and conditioning side, because again, I'm not a lacrosse coach, right? I'm a strength and conditioning coach that knows a little bit about lacrosse, so I know my lane. My goal is to eventually learn more about lacrosse, right? But for now, I'm staying in my lane. I tend to mainly I train, boys, middle school, high school, and obviously, a couple pros here and there. So I can't really speak to specificity of training. But again, when it comes to females, it's really, I would say the strength training is probably the most important thing, and especially when it comes to change of direction. When females start lifting consistently, it's like a night and day change. It's unbelievable. But yes, I would say certain positions, though, let's say from a conditioning standpoint and a movement standpoint, do have certain needs. Like we were talking about, I would say, attackmen, there's a lot of cutting, a lot of change of direction, a lot of spinning, a lot of rolling. They do that in very, very tight quarters. So depending on how much they're training in general, you can try to put them in scenarios where they can get better at that and more efficient. Middies are going to be doing a lot more running, so they need to be able to do those, 5 to 8 second bursts and then go on a 40-yard sprint and repeat that. And defensemen, obviously, they run as well. They're going to do a little bit more side-to-side movement. A lot of it is going to be finding that base, getting their footwork and tracking and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, being super strong and having a gas tank for days and being able to play physical is probably one of the best things that you can do to play lacrosse, is the physicality part of it. I love that part of it.
What is your take on all of the injuries that are happening a lot more that people are saying it's because of turf?
So there's a bunch of studies out there. There are some studies that say more injuries are happening on turf. There are other ones saying it's not. It's happening on grass. I don't think at the end of the day, I don't think that's the problem. I think that the training is the problem, and the lack of sleep, and the lack of variety in someone's training, right? I'm not saying that, like, a lot of people will say it's the early specialization, like kids shouldn't only play one sport. Well, guess what? A lot of kids at a certain point are going to play one sport, and that is okay. But early on, you should be playing multiple sports. Do all the backyard stuff, like play as many sports as you can. And eventually, if you want to play lacrosse, focus on lacrosse. But at the end of the day, you can't just do lacrosse 24/7. You need to do lacrosse. You need to do your speed work. You need to do your lifting. If you need any conditioning, if you have to do your recovery stuff. But I would say that it's a lack of variety, but I actually think it's overscheduling and undersleep. I think kids these days they're going from hockey to lacrosse to a private lesson in one night. And they're getting to bed at 11 o'clock, and then they're wondering why they feel like rubbish the next day. Teenagers and young kids need 9 hours plus of sleep. That's what the research says and the science says. They need 9+ hours of sleep. The average teenager gets 7.5. So you can blame it on specialization. You can blame it on this and that. But when I see kids going from practice to practice to practice, and all they're doing is eating McDonald's and going to bed at midnight, I just feel like the issue's not what I mean. The remedy is maybe looking a little bit deeper, because I think kids are overscheduled. I think it's way too much, and I think that's one of the reasons why people get hurt, because they're just always chronically tired. How many high school kids do you see full of energy? Unless they drank like 4 Red Bulls.
Yeah.
But they're always tired, right? They're always just like, so my point is, because they're not sleeping. They're just not sleeping.
Spending too much time on the phone.
100%.
Yeah, the phone, the Xbox, the iPad, sure, all of it. It's tough. That's one of the things that I talk to my kids about all the time, and I think we're one of the only coaches at our school that like really emphasize what you eat and eating good food before games. Like, and it was funny because like the head coach started doing it, and I'm like, why are you? They're not going to listen. But he did it I noticed he did it after every practice, and I was like, do you do that on purpose? One day I just asked him, and he's like, yeah. Do you know what they're eating?
Yeah.
He's like, do you have any? And he's a farmer. He's an agricultural guy, and he's like, do you have any idea what these kids are eating? Yeah. And I was like, well, if it's like me in high school, yeah, I probably know. It's probably not good. It's probably
exactly.
like a lot of midnight talks at Taco Bell. You know what I mean? But he was like, they just have to get more nutrients. They're not getting any nutrients in any food that they're buying at the supermarket. They have to buy like Whole Foods and eat that. Is that something that you think is a huge problem?
Well, I think kids are getting calories, but they're not getting nutrients. Right. And I think that's the big thing, right? They eat a bunch of food that's a bunch of processed stuff, and they're not getting the vitamins and minerals and all that stuff. Now, look, I'm not saying you have to like eat a salad every meal and shove veggies down your mouth, like, because kids won't do that. But I think it starts with small habits, right? And I think as parents, if we can model it a little bit better, right? Just having, a little bit of fruit and veggies in our sort of, nightly dinner or whatever, just, making a big change rarely works, but slow habits over time, I think, is a really nice way to do it. But I think one of the things that I've done, and I've done this with a couple kids in town and also with my son, is just saying, hey, this week before your practices, try to eat this and let me know how you feel. And then the next week, don't eat that. Let me know how you feel. And 99% of the time, like, I felt so much better. And so, but here's the thing, because you mentioned nutrients and fueling. A lot of these kids assume that they're out of shape, but maybe they're just not eating enough to begin with, or eating the right stuff. So when it comes to fuel, it's like, hey, if I got to drive back home and it's an hour away, but I only got, a little bit of gas left, I'm just not going to get there. Yeah. So I think a big part of it is the underfueling.
Yeah.
Parents. So I used to do training, private lessons, small group training, catching, throwing, all the whole 9 yards back in the day. And I loved it when the kids came that wanted to be there. Mm-hmm. And you run into that where the parents want their kids training more so than the kid wants to train.
Yeah. And that is, as a coach, in my mind, that is one of the hardest things. Because
Sure.
So, I coach middle school age athletes, and in town we've got a bunch of kids, and probably like 7 or 8 are club guys, and they can play lacrosse. And then a lot of the other kids are like, this was the only other sport that was available. And it's really hard to put, a kid that's been playing club for a couple of years with a brand new kid in town. It's just that doesn't know what they're doing. So I think a lot of the times it's just really tough, because as a parent, you want your kid to be active, right? So you want them to try new things, but if they feel forced, or they feel like you need to do this, like, do you think the kid's going to like it? So I think really the key here is it just needs to be fun for the kids, and it needs to be an environment where they can feel like themselves. I think that's the most important thing, even if the parents initially send them, because as a coach, maybe the kid comes in not wanting to go, but if you're a good coach and you care, that kid's going to be your buddy for life. So it's an opportunity as well to help.
What age? Is there a specific age where girls and boys should start training? Is it 6th grade, 7th grade? Everybody I talk to has a different answer.
So
I guess it depends on what it is.
Yeah, so I think a big part of it has to do with maturation and growth spurts. There's this sort of term called peak height velocity. That's basically the growth spurts, and it's a time in which athletes grow at a rapid rate. That is basically the fastest point in which their development, in which they grow. I would say middle school is probably the best, but we can't use a chronological age. We need to think about using a developmental age.
Sure.
Because we know 6th graders that are way more mature physically and way more mature mentally than 8th graders that aren't. So middle school's tough because puberty is a great equalizer.
Sure.
So that's the difference. So I think a big part of it is, can they pay attention? Can they take instruction? Or are they like, some of the kids at practice when the coach isn't looking, they're smacking them in the back of the head with their lacrosse stick. So I think the determining factor is, can they pay attention?
Gotcha.
And if they can't, it is what it is, but it's going to look very different depending on the kid too.
Focus.
Yeah. If you don't want to, and I hate to say it now with the stuff that I do, I just, I donate my time, but if I volunteer my time, I don't have expectations on performance when it comes to town. I just have expectations on, hopefully they want to come back next week. Right. Now, when I'm working with elite or high level athletes that have dreams and aspirations of a scholarship or playing at the highest level, we got work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I say this, it's funny you talk about like the kind of the growth spurt rate, right? Like I've been 5'7" since 5th grade. I can't change that. There's nothing I can do about that, right? And I think that's kind of one of the challenges that I have a lot of athletes on my team that are, we had a kid who was 6'8", but he played JV, and he's like, why am I playing JV? I'm like, you can't catch the ball. Like you can't catch the ball. Like, I'm sorry. Like and he was a freak. And then he figured out how to catch the ball and pick up the ball. And we played him in a JV game and he had like 8 goals.
Oh,
it's like this. It's like,
it's so funny because I always say, and I talk to parents and I explain to them that like lacrosse is not like soccer where you can just kick the ball and they just follow it, right? There is a fundamental component of catching and throwing that if you do not learn how to do that and do it on your own, you're not going to get very good at lacrosse at an early age. Maybe you will when you get a little bit later, but it's a little bit more skill oriented early on. So I think that's the hard part for people to understand. And I think as coaches in town, I always have, conversations with people. It's like, look, I will coach your kid. I will help them. I will create a positive environment. But at the end of the day, if they can't catch and throw and pass, I can't do much. That's like saying, I want to play hockey, but I'm afraid to put skates on.
But that's what Jack does. Jack's whole business is teaching kids that aspect and field awareness and playing in a team and all that stuff. So really high-level athletes, if you're doing just one thing, you might get there, but you have a better chance of getting there with training and club and a good high school coach. I feel like everybody is like, oh, I have to get to a NESCAC. I have to get to an Ivy League. I have to get a D1 offer. We were talking about kids that got D1 offers this week. We were talking about it. And it's like, is that the goal? You paid all this money and you're just going to go here because it's the first place that liked you. And I know that's not kind of your wheelhouse, right? But it's part of it, right? Because we're teaching these kids lessons, hopefully. You're teaching them how to take care of their body. You're teaching them to play in a team. Those are things they need the rest of their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Life skills, 100%. Yeah, no, I think that, I agree with both because I think there's the self-responsibility and the team aspect. You need to do both. Like if you're going to be a good athlete, you need to be a good team player, but you need to be able to say, I got to do the work on my own. And if you don't want to do the work on your own, then, well, you're probably not going to make it. And if you do, you may not last.
Right.
Kyle and I talk to a lot of coaches, right? On the podcast and in real life. One of the things that I've come away with talking to the coaches is nothing prepares the high school athlete, female, male, for their fall freshman semester in college in terms of the discipline, the training, the commitment to the team, practices, and then the schoolwork. So obviously you're training the players not only to train, but you're also teaching them what's ahead for them.
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is if you are an athlete looking to play at the collegiate level, and that's something that's on your radar, and let's be honest, there's a lot of kids that are freshmen that's on the radar, right? That's something that they want to do. I think it's important to have someone that can be honest about their path and what it's really going to take, and also the expectations every step of the way. So one of the things that I see all the time, and this happens a lot in the world of lacrosse, is a kid gets recruited. And he's a good club player and he's got a lot of connections. He's never been in the weight room. They hand him a packet when he gets accepted, and it's the football packet, right? So I get a panic call from the dad going, Bobby needs to hang clean next week, and he needs to get tested in his 1RM hang clean. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is the dumbest thing on the planet. So you know what I normally do, honestly? I usually reach out to the coach and I go, hey coach, you know, usually we know someone that knows someone. It's very, very much like the lacrosse world. I go, do you care about the lifts, or do you care that this athlete is ready? Because if you care that this athlete is ready, they're with me, they're going to be ready.
Right.
But if you care that they can hang clean 275 and that's all you care about, then cool, we can help them. But I actually don't maybe think that that's the best direction anyways. But I always reach out to the coach and say, do you care? Because usually, you know what they do? This is what strength coaches do. They hand out the packets and forget about it and say, see you in the fall. They usually don't care. So I reach out and say, if you just want them ready, and I know that there are specific things they're looking for, like if I know they're going to do a yo-yo beep test, which is a anaerobic conditioning test, or they're going to do a Cooper test, a 2 mile, or they're going to do the 40, right? So I need to know the specific tests in which that they're going to prepare for, because yes, we have to practice for the test, but at the end of the day, they still need to be good at the sport.
I think one of my last question, because obviously we're running late on time because this is very natural. It's a good conversation. Supplements. Should athletes take them? If so, which ones? And what is your stance on that process?
Supplementation is exactly what it sounds like. It should supplement an already healthy diet. And if you need a supplement to fill in gaps because maybe there's deficits, maybe you have low magnesium or iron or vitamin B or D, then a supplement is the right thing to do. But I think just buying a whole bunch of supplements in the hopes that it's going to change your life is a fantastic way to throw some money down the drain. Now, with that being said, there are a handful of supplements that seem to over time be a really, really solid choice for athletes. And one is creatine monohydrate. It's one of the most researched, sort of supplement in the world. And not only is there the physical component, but there's actually some research on help with cognitive development and too with creatine. And then, I think a lot of the other stuff is just filling gaps. Like some people will have a little bit of magnesium or zinc before they go to sleep. It helps them sleep. So, I think eating a higher protein diet is very, very important from different sort of sources, whether you're getting it from chicken, from fish, from steak or whatever. But I think a variety is good. But I think supplements are there for what they need to be. They need to supplement things. I think every once in a while athletes could use a fast digesting carbohydrate type drink, which will get into their system very, very quickly. It's easy to digest. It's actually made with a compound called fractured maltodextrin. It's very, very easy to digest. But what it does is it gets you carbs into your system. So when you're running and you're sprinting, your anaerobic fuel system, which is run by glycogen, which is blood sugar, will allow you to fuel up. So that's why having a little bit of extra carbs in a liquid form could be really good during a very intense session.
Can you, maybe you won't say this, can you please tell kids to stop taking pre-workout before they play the games?
Yeah. So don't. Thank you. So this is what happens is the pre-workout, it gives them that bump for a little bit, but they're using it as a substitute for poor nutrition, and then they bonk second half, and then they feel like absolute crap. So what should happen is they should just learn how to eat healthy and find a meal that's easy to make and that they enjoy and that fulfills the needs that they have from a fueling standpoint. And I'm pretty sure it's not like 3 Red Bulls and, a Starburst, right? So that's the big thing is just you cannot use a stimulant-based supplement to take the place of calories. You just can't. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, for most people, if you are going to use a stimulant, and this is for adults too, a cup of coffee is probably the best thing for you. If you want caffeine.
My last question, we have a mutual friend, Jeff Trainer.
Yes.
Freak athlete.
Yes.
Wonderful young man.
Yes.
He comes to you. He wants to train with you. Where do you start? Where are you going to finish?
So I mentioned this earlier, but when I got introduced to Jeff, it was from one of my son's private coaches, Kevin Tobin. So you guys probably know Kevin. Kevin's a great guy. And I said to Kevin, he ended up linking me up with Jeff. The first thing I did was an evaluation. And I did an intake with all of his injury history. I looked at everything. I sent him an evaluation. I said, do this. And then I broke him down and got him on the table and looked at everything that sort of he's bringing to the table. And then I created a warm up for him. I created up like soft tissue work. We put together a comprehensive program, and we've been working together for about 8 weeks now, and we're having a lot of fun. And it's cool because after working with so many high level athletes, specifically in the last decade with like fighters, it's fun to go back to like my roots of field and court athletes. So he's the best, and that he is a freak athlete. I mean, he does stuff, and people just watch him, like watch the guy jump, and you're like, that's just not normal. He's just he moves so well.
Yeah, I've played with him for a long time, like indoor and like training stuff in winter. He's incredible. He'll catch anything. It's awesome.
And I will tell you
He can run forever too.
Yeah.
I got to tell you something too. When he comes to the gym, there'll be times there'll be 6-8 lacrosse players, and he makes time to talk to every single kid and learn their name.
Yep.
And I'm like, I haven't told my son Connor, because my son Connor adores him. I said, that's one of the good ones. You see,
He's a class act.
He's given every kid, even if it's a minute.
Yep.
That kid, I can't tell you how many parents texted me, he got to meet Jeff. And and Jeff didn't have to do that, but he's just a good dude. He's such a great guy. And we're having a lot of fun. He's a great guy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we got to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming. We could have another hour.
Great.
Yeah.
We'll have you back. We'll talk more specific stuff.
Yeah.
I'll get you to train me when I'm ready to go back to sport. And that'll be great. But tell everyone where they can find more information about your training.
So I do a lot of social media on Instagram at Coach Mike Perry. That's where I put a lot of my content out for lacrosse. The name of my gym is Skill of Strength, and use me as a resource. I've been doing this for a long time. If you guys need something, reach out. I would love to help. I would love to get involved. If it helps people, let's do it.
Great. Awesome. Thanks very much. Great job.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks for coming on. And thanks again for listening to New England Lacrosse Journal's Chasing the Goal podcast. I'm Jack Piatelli. I'm Kyle Devitt. See you next time.